Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven at the helm this evening. Want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're listening to, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. I will be taking calls in the second hour. The number is 347-688-2902 or Freedom Screen on Skype, and you are listening to Studio A. My special guest this evening is Dr. Heather Lynn. Heather Lynn is a writer, researcher, and archaeologist with a PhD in comparative religion. She is president of the Society for Truth in Archaeological Research and member of the World Archaeological Congress. Her research topics include mythology, esotericism, metaphysics, and the origin of consciousness. Heather has traveled the country on a quest for answers about our origins. She broke away from the mainstream after realizing that much of the evidence that could be used to help answer these questions was being suppressed. Now she is on a quest to help empower the public by giving them access to archaeological tools, resources, and education so that they can make up their own minds. Heather's new book, Anthrotheology, Searching for God in Man, is on pre-order and will be available this October. I take it's live now, and we'll find out for sure with Dr. Heather Lynn. Her website is www.drheatherlynn.com, and please welcome Heather to the show this evening. Heather, how are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm fine. I feel like I just warped right through that intro.
That's okay. I think people know me.
Yes, they do. Yeah. So we're going to have to talk about what you've been up to since the last time you've been on the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of new discoveries, a lot of new projects. It's quite an exciting time. And as you mentioned, my new book, Anthrotheology, it's out October 31st. So
Excellent.
Really looking forward to that.
Yeah. And that's on Amazon.com?
Yes, it'll be on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold.
Sweet. Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really excited. It's something I've worked on for, a few years now, and it's just all kind of come together. Although I feel like I've been doing the research for it for forever.
Yeah.
It's a very personal project that it's something that, I just, it's one of those things where you have this in you and you just have to get it out before you do anything else. It's the one project that,
Mm-hmm.
It all comes down to this.
Right. So what exactly is the Anthrotheology, if you want to give us a brief description of the book itself?
Sure. Well, basically, what it is I explain it sort of like a timeline of archaeological evidence, if you will, on the search for God. And so I use the term God to represent consciousness, the inner voice, the creator. There's so many versions of what people believe to be a God, and it's one of the questions I explore in the book. So basically, it's more of an origin of consciousness, but looked at and examined through archaeological evidence. So it's not a complete history by any means. That would be, a very long, voluminous work. So it's certainly not a complete history, but it just hits upon the most basic principles, starting from the dawn of consciousness, or what some people believe to be the dawn of consciousness. It goes into some of the theories proposed by Julian Jaynes and what was called the bicameral mind. And this is an idea that deals with the physiology of the brain and how we perceive the world around us, possibly giving us this idea of what a God would be. So I look at it in terms of, neuroscience, and it's a very interdisciplinary book, although the core of it is archaeology. But I like to include a lot of different things to sort of, be all-encompassing and give everybody sort of an overview. And it's a very personal book. See, it's more of an account of my own personal journey to find answers. Mm-hmm. So I was raised in a Catholic home, very, I wouldn't say religious, more like superstitious. And I never really questioned it too much until I got to be maybe about 10 years old. And there was a little metaphysical bookshop near me. And I would go behind my mother's back, no less. And I would go into that store and I would just snoop around and look at the books. And there would be so many different things on different religions, different philosophies. And it was so enchanting. So I was very open to these ideas. Along with that, I was really interested in Greek mythology. And so I always had this appreciation for other people's beliefs. Well, as I got a little older, as many people do, I kind of left the church, went out, and just literally went across the country. I went to every single church along the way. And this was probably about, at this point, we're talking 14 years ago at this point. So this was early days of the internet. So I used MapQuest, and that wasn't a very good.
Oh, right.
I put in my search terms in MapQuest at the time: churches, temples, synagogues, and I pulled up everything you could imagine, and it had little points on each. And mind you, some of it were there was wild goose chases galore because it was MapQuest. And so I had printouts of all these, and I just hit the road, and I went and I visited every place I could to try to just, I don't know, get answers. I was a little lost and forlorn and very curious and very adventurous. So I looked for answers everywhere I could. And in doing so, I found out answers to questions that I didn't even know that I had. And so that's why I say it feels like some of this has been in the works for a very long time for me. Mm-hmm. And so I go and I adopt some different points of view. I studied Buddhism and different things, and I was just very interested in a lot of different outlooks, but never found one single answer that resonated with me completely. So it just went on like that. And then I got involved in school and just kind of studied other things. I went into religion, and it's just been a passion of mine to kind of understand what are these like spiritual concepts and why do we have them and what evolutionary benefit do they have, if any, and how real, if you want to call them real, are they? Who is God? Where is God? What is the influence in our life? And is there anything that we have that is a tangible proof that could help us understand that? So that's some of the bigger questions that I explore. But like I said, it's more of a personal journey that I kind of put out and, just hang it all around these archaeological sites and artifacts. And a lot of them I try to show that are kind of less known, and I pull them all together. And like I say, it's a timeline, but it's not necessarily a complete history or chronology. It's more just like starting from the very beginning. What do we know? And I travel through ideas such as, the possibility that it's some sort of manifestation of our brain. It's chemically oriented. I look at ideas that perhaps there is something to this. I look at ideas of physics and then quantum physics and some of the strange ideas that could support the idea that there is something beyond the physical realm. So it doesn't take necessarily a hard stance on anything. The book itself is a journey, and it's meant to kind of mimic the personal journey that I've had and how I've gotten to the point that I'm at today with my personal relationship to God.
Mm-hmm. Sounds awesome. I can't wait to read it, actually. It sounds really good. And, that's good because it will spin the wheels of the people that are reading it. It's informative, and it also kind of triggers their psyche insofar as just wondering, But right. Consciousness is everything. And to me, I believe that consciousness really does, it's pretty much our evolution, whether people realize it or not. So,
right.
Yeah.
It is. It really is. It's all around us. It's something that is this arguably uniquely human experience. And there's so many mysteries surrounding it. And so many people, approach it from the particular angles that everybody's used to, whether it's some sort of new age ideas or, even quantum physics and a lot of these neurological ideas. And so I thought, some of these are really great theories and ideas, but I don't often see them intertwined in any kind of interdisciplinary fashion. On top of that, I rarely find that there's a good connection to archaeology in that sense, the evidence, the artifacts left behind. And so the idea of anthrotheology, anthro being man, and theology is, generally it's taken to be the study of, but in the classical era, that would mean the speaking of or the teaching of or the professing of. So that's kind of where we get the study of. But if you take it in a literal sense, anthrotheology is more about the the speaking of God within man. So one of the questions I ask is, what can we learn about God through man? And I've gotten some responses from people who've heard about the book, or, asked me. A lot of people are very down on their fellow human beings, and they say, well, what in the world could man, what would God want to do with a man? And you can't learn anything from, God about man. It's just very naysaying about men, human beings, and their positions in the cosmos. So I just argue with that. I think that, we have to have a better sense of self-worth and worth in our own humankind, and say, these people throughout history have made artifacts, they've made structures that are amazing, they've made music, they've made arts, the humanities, we've made so many things. And I believe that there are divine qualities in that, and that we can't be so quick to write off the creations of man, because, most of the time we're looking at God as a creator. And if we are made in that image, as many religions have said, then we too are creators. Mm-hmm. So we should value our own creations, and more than value them, we should take the time to study them and find out what it all means in relation to the bigger picture.
Right. Yeah, we're co-creators of the universe as far as I'm concerned. But it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you look at the cellular design and our molecular structure, I mean, if you go really deep within our own design, we're a mechanical universe in a matrix, in a spacesuit, in a body. And so, I mean, that's the complex design, of course, but it's still the same thing. I mean, it's that God particle that lies within that, by divine grace, we become more enlightened as we progress on this planet. But yeah, I find it really interesting about the archaeology, because they left so much behind. All these different civilizations have left so many different artifacts and archives that have activated on some level someone's consciousness, for sure.
Absolutely. And there's so many similarities between a lot of the myths and stories and accounts. It's very interesting. So, I look into that a little bit. I mean, there's some obvious reasons for the similarities. I mean, people did travel and they did talk to one another, but there are other more unknown reasons as to why the myths seem to kind of parallel one another. And so, in the book, I cite some of the work of Joseph Campbell, who I think is amazing, and his work with the monomyth and the hero's journey. And I think all of those things are very important to consider when studying the human condition and our idea of God. Because really, I think anytime you attempt to study God, you're really practicing a form of anthrotheology. Because how can we actually study God? All we have is what men have made or what we can see around us. So I think most of the time when we do study theology, what we're doing is studying more of an anthrotheology. If you look at the ancient texts, who wrote the text? Physically, tangibly, human beings did, man did. So, I think it's part and parcel. I think you have to, look at the creations of man, look deeper into that, and find out what kind of divine influence, if any, is behind that.
Right. Yeah. Well, there certainly are markers left behind on this planet for people to be activated on a higher level of their own design and consciousness. So that's the good side of it.
Absolutely.
I keep getting a feedback, so hopefully you guys, I can hear it on my end, and Heather, you said you couldn't hear it on your end. Is that correct?
Correct. I hear
nothing. So you're good. Okay, so hopefully you guys are, you can't hear it either. It's annoying me, though. Damn it. Anyways, I'll deal with it. It's a full moon. It's an after full moon. But anyways, so what have you been working on with the archaeological research? So let's talk about step by step what you've been doing this past, 6 months or so.
Oh, yeah. I guess it's been that while.
Well, it has been a while, yeah. A few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we spoke last time about the Sumerian controversy.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And so that, I plan to follow up for that. I was in the middle of researching some things for that follow-up. And, it's amazing because once you put something out like that, the response is overwhelming. I've had so many people contact me with leads, with information, and now, some of them are not the greatest leads, but out of that, I have been taken in new directions, and I have found so many different things. So my follow-up was scheduled to come out a few months ago, but I've had to put that off due to having to flesh out these new ideas because some of them are just unbelievable. So I have to like go through and find out how good are my sources. That's the number one thing is when you have these sources, you have to find out what's in it for them, who are they, how trustworthy, how reliable. So a lot of this is like checking up on sources, and so that's been one thing. During this, I've also come across, I don't know if you saw the news recently, but they found another site that was just a huge site. It was really amazing. A site in Iraq. A villager brought this is in 2008. A villager brought archaeologists cuneiform inscriptions engraved with the name of an ancient city, a city that they knew existed, but they just weren't quite sure where. So it wasn't a city of legend. They knew that it was real. They knew that they could find it, but it had just never been physically located until now. The villager said that the text came from beneath a mound that was nearby, and the inscriptions identified the city as the ancient city of Idu, dating it to about the 12th century BCE. And so they excavated in 2011, and they just put out the report. A lot of these things are really slow. So they just came out with their report. But it's an amazing, yeah. And I got a hold of the report, and this was nice because unlike the situation with the Sumerian controversy, with the latest discovery near Ur, this one seemed to have quite a great deal of transparency. I was able to get a hold of the full report. It includes everything you could imagine, multiple pages upon pages, and even full translations of the cylinder seals that they found. And so it's pretty lengthy, and it's pretty academic, and it's probably pretty dry and boring. So, but it's very important, and it's very detailed, and it's very transparent. So what I've been working on is kind of getting all that information together in a more, a form that could be better appreciated, get out all the jargon and just kind of break it down to here's the deal. So break it down from about 50 pages to maybe 3 pages to say, here's what's really going on. Here are the translations. Here are the pictures. And so I'm working on that because this is a very interesting discovery. They say that it could add a previously unknown chapter to the history of the Middle Assyrian Empire. So, because till now, only the western part of the empire had been discovered. So this is completely new, and the amount of artifacts they found was just wow, and they were in great shape too. And so that's something I've been working on, just kind of getting that information together. And then also doing a little bit of watchdog work that way. Like I said, I kind of looked deeply into that one when it first came out because of the region that it's located in and because of the sensitivity of the area and some of the information that I've had about, the powers that be and what it is that they do behind the scenes with these artifacts. And so, I looked at it like, let's see if everything's on the up and up, at least from what I can tell. So far, it looks so good. It looks pretty good. I can't vouch for it. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, they've just done a great job yet. But I've been really impressed with the amount of transparency. Not only that, but compared to what I wrote about in the Sumerian controversy, they actually included as their researchers students from the nearby universities in Iraq. And that's something that I think is very important. That's something that I felt missing before. See, a lot of times people go into these areas and they excavate. Of course, they have permission, but they get permission from government. Some governments are corrupt, but somehow they get the permission. They get in there, they do what they need to do for them, and they get out. And they take out the artifacts. And it's my personal belief that when you can go into a country and you can help educate the locals as to how to properly excavate and preserve and do what you need to do to promote your own cultural heritage, your own industry, essentially, and your own academics. I think that's really important. I feel like a lot of times we go in, I say we as in mostly the Western world. A lot of the Western world they will go into these, communities and just exploit them and take advantage of the people there. And I'm really against that for obvious
Oh, yeah.
reasons. I think it's really corrupt, and I would like to see more of a cultivation of education and allowing people to be the custodians of their own cultural heritage. Just recently, I came back from Los Angeles. I was doing some filming for the show Ancient Aliens. While I was there, I stopped at the Getty Villa in Malibu. And I was thrilled, let me tell you. That place is beautiful. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to go so badly was because they are showing the Cyrus cylinder, and that is on special loan from the British Museum. And this cylinder is it's in beautiful condition. It is cracked. It has, some pieces that are cracked at the bottom, but I mean, for the most part, given how old it is, it's just in beautiful condition, and it's just an amazing sight to see. But, again, it's on loan from the British Museum.
Right.
It's not, so, it's had a heritage in its own country, but it's just one of those things, like, if you look through all our museums, we go and we take everybody's artifacts, and there are, we do cooperate. There's plenty of cooperation going on, but I just would like to see more, because there's a lot of behind the scenes that we don't see, where people are in battles and struggles to get those artifacts back because they feel they belong in their country, and rightfully so.
I totally agree.
So that's one of those things. It's just, a real passion of mine. I feel like archaeology and shared history like that is something that is very influential and important. And it can be a sense of pride. It can be a sense of unity and cultural cohesion. And I think when you start to take that away from people, you can really break them down. And in some ways, I think that that's been an intentional thing throughout history. Mm-hmm. So I like to see that people preserve their history and take care of it and protect it on a local level to the best of their ability. And I think it's our jobs, to be helpful in facilitating that, mm-hmm. not just taking it away.
Exactly. So. And what kind of problems do you think you'd run into? I mean, as far as these governments go, obviously they're probably hoarding more archaeological, objects than people realize. I imagine we're only seeing just a bit, just a glimpse of what they really have. So how do you combat that as a regular person in mainstream, or even these people in these countries? I mean, how do they combat that with this big government trying to take all their beautiful artifacts from them and keep them so that they can't appreciate that?
That's one of the most difficult things, because in a lot of these countries, that's really not on the forefront of their minds, because it can't be. They're dealing with so many other things that, it's a terrible, unfair choice that they'll have to make between, do we have defense? Do we have food? Do we have, social services and infrastructure? Or do we try to maintain historic preservation and these types of things? I mean, sometimes it really does come down to that. And a lot of times you'll have people on a local level, maybe farmers or what have you, that will come across artifacts in their farming, and they sell them because they recognize it has a cultural importance, but they're in a position where they see this as a money-making opportunity. Mm-hmm. And they have to do that in order to survive in some cases. So I think it's a matter of ethics. And I know that there are lots of people that work very hard to maintain that level of, moral and ethical, that level. But, I'm really disenchanted, because I have come across too many situations where that's been all talk. And in practice, I've seen other things. I've seen where wealthy art collectors and art dealers would donate to universities and say, well, this money goes is in the form of a grant, and, within the partnership with this person, that person, whatever. And I just think that that's a conflict of interest, because the university gets the money from these individuals or their organizations, and then they're expected to find these artifacts and not just hand them over. I know of too many situations where that's been the case. Wealthy art collectors who funnel grant money into universities in order to have the universities do the work in finding things for their personal collections. Whatever little things that come out of it, maybe some pottery or a couple other artifacts, what have you, the scraplings of what they deemed not to fit in their personal collection, those get out to the public for research. And that is wrong. And that's why there are many artifacts out there that we will never see because they're locked up in a case in a mansion somewhere.
Right. It's so wrong. It's totally wrong. But yeah, private collectors, the world's cursed to mankind. But it's ridiculous. I mean, they're hoarding, just like the Vatican comes to mind. They hoard information in archives, and they don't even have the celestial evolution to even access half the data that they're hoarding. It's very annoying to me to watch these people be so greedy, and it's all about control. And it's a shame that they're doing this because they can't hide what we are. Our birthright, our celestial birthright, cannot be taken from us, although they'd like to try.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is, you're right. It's about control. It's about control and power. And in terms of what other people can do about it, I would say, unfortunately, there's not a lot that can be done in a big, powerful, all-encompassing way. It's something that needs to be done, just pushing and pushing and pushing. But I think the most important thing for now is at least just getting the information out there, educating people of the importance of archaeology in general, history in general. So many people are apathetic because when you talk history, you're reminded of the times in maybe high school where it was just droning on with like dates and timelines and names and rote memorization. But, we have to move past that and see that people who really want control, they control the history. They're the ones that write the history. They're the ones that put out the history. So you really have to be mindful of what you're being told. You have to be very skeptical, and you have to take a lot of different things into account and just research and care. Basic apathy is where the problem lies. Too many people are apathetic, and that's where the problem lies, I think, essentially. That's what they're banking on. Anybody who wants power, they bank on people being apathetic. So the more they can bore you with history and convince you that it's boring, the more apathetic you'll be about it. And then the less you'll care, obviously. And so they can go on and do whatever behind your back. So I think the most important thing is to just basically get involved, keep an eye out, look at the news, see what's going on, and follow stories, and just, pay attention. Just pay attention right now, because the more people we have watching, the more likely we can spot inconsistencies or corruption. And then if anybody sees something, question it and write about it. Publish it on a website, anything. Just get the information out and share that information with other people, collaborate with other people. And I think little by little, that will make a difference.
I agree. It already has, even in, regardless of archaeology or not. I mean, alternative media is doing that. So we're definitely decoding data, whether
Absolutely.
They like it or not. We're seeing through the veil of their illusions. And I think that's really critical right now, like you've said, because there's so many obfuscations. I mean, it's pathetic, quite honestly. But artifacts and archaeology in general, I mean, it's a great area to start researching for a lot of people who haven't really tuned into it. I think that's a good avenue, because there is so much hidden, and there's so much that really is a decoding of our own heritage on so many levels.
Right. And I think something that's equally as important about it is it's fun. It's interesting. People have been drawn to that for so long. I've talked to so many people that have said, oh, archaeology, I love that. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And everybody has said that kind of, well, so I think somewhere along the line, there's been a kid out there that wants to be an archaeologist or has that interest. And so I think that there is a mass resurgence in interest in things archaeological. So just for the sheer fact that it's fun, it's a good way to introduce people to new ideas. It's just like the gateway, it's just like the gateway, gateway information, just start with a little bit of like, the pyramids and just go on full force with it, open the door to new ideas. So
right. And it stirs the imagination. Nowadays
exactly.
kids have their computers and their iPhones and all this other garbage for their stimulators, and it's really sad because when I was a kid, my sister and I, we used to just go ride our bikes everywhere. But what comes to mind is she used to bury chicken bones up the hill, right? And then she'd leave them there for like 6 months and say, oh, let's go on a dig. And we'd find them and I'm like, oh, it's a dinosaur.
So cute.
This just shows you that my sister, very strange. But anyways, it was funny because we would do stuff like that and she would definitely bury stuff, and then we go back and dig it up. And it was pretty interesting. But, that's the kind of imagination that I don't think kids have anymore. I mean, I don't see it as much. I think they're consumed by, regular mainstream technology and television, which is kind of unfortunate. So I hope that they start focusing more on the earth and what's here.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think, that's you make a really good point about the imagination aspect of it. I think that this is a point of contention for a lot of people when they discuss alternative ideas. The idea that creativity or imagination has no place in science. Well, in the scientific method, sure, there's definite methods. It's not, you have no business just kind of daydreaming or making things up. You're applying a particular method and you're going about particular steps, and it's a very kind of cold and unbiased thing to attempt. Mm-hmm. But before you get to that point, I think the use of creativity and imagination is essential to coming up with ideas with which to hypothesize. I think that you first have to have an imaginative mind. You have to have alternative ways of looking at the world. So I think that that's very important. And I think a lot of times people are losing sight of that. Mm-hmm. And obviously can go further in the other direction where you just get very imaginative and creative and you start creating your own ideas and you don't really do much by way of testing those or anything. So, I think it can go too far in either direction, but I think there's a happy medium that needs to be in place where we allow some form of creativity and imagination into scientific endeavors. I think that's where it starts. If it starts with people who have a sense of wonderment and question the world around them and they want to know the answers. Right. And so I think that's something that should be fostered, especially in kids. So if there are, interesting mysteries and kids get involved in that, even if they're not right, even if they're flat out not right at all, there's just no way they're proven, they're unscientific. Let the children study that and show them by example, show them the proof, let them test it, let them see for themselves how, no, this doesn't really pan out, does it? This is not correct, but let them do it, because we live in a world where too many experts are constantly telling us what to think and what to believe.
Exactly. Well said. That's just it. They're trying to get everybody to not think anymore. And children especially, and everything is, inanimate objects, worship inanimate object through whatever, it's a television or a computer or whatever, but it's that same thing, but that's where consciousness comes into play as well. But truly, people need to start thinking again, and I think that's a critical thing right now on this timeline, and I see a lot of children just being programmed.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's so sad too, and you watch them with the poor health, poor nutrition. We live in a country of so much, relative wealth, and there's children that have, malnutrition and diabetes and these different things, and because all the food now is just artificially colored, it's GMO, it's a disaster. So we're not feeding our bodies, we're not feeding our brains, and then so we're starving. We're literally starving. True. And then so we keep overindulging with this corn syrup and whatnot, and then also this just useless, information and video games. And
it's Frankenfood, and it's a virtual scene that I'm burned out on it. I don't know about you, but I'm totally burned out on the virtual scene that they're throwing at us in America. Everything is a game and a stage and a set and a script, and I'm like, I just can't deal with it anymore. I'm just done with it. And this is what we're feeding the children, this whole illusion, this whole false matrix. So, really, it's just kind of like time to take the curtain down,
Yes.
And just start again.
It's all about distracting, just distract people with the flashing lights and the whatever. And then, absolutely. I had a couple years or so, about 7 years ago at this point, I had lunch with Dr. Alvin Poussaint. he was the contributor to The Cosby Show, and he was he worked at Harvard as a psychiatrist and professor, and just an amazing, amazing gentleman. And his whole theories and lectures and opinions and what have you, he believed that the lights, the flashing, the rates of music, the frames, all of the things in cartoons and television in general really had a measurable effect on a child's brain, and that it was causing essentially like a brain damage. And his argument, given that he used to contribute to things like The Cosby Show and the Cosby Kids, the animated show, his idea was that, we're losing now the sense of maybe family or morality or education in television in favor of just flashing lights and whatever that, some people have said can induce epileptic seizures, while he said absolutely there are measurable effects on the children's brain. And one of his causes is he goes out and he lectures and speaks on, the effects that media has on children. And I would highly recommend anybody reading his books on the issue. Very insightful gentleman, very passionate about that cause, and he has really good stuff out there about it. So definitely recommend his books.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, they're definitely doing it. They're programming and they're just slowly bleeding people to death. They're just breaking people down, whether it's through Frankenfood or, the false matrix. Everything is a lie and deception, and it's a drain on the energetic field. And that's why, the things that give us life are the planet, and things that we can kind of reboot from, is basically using our minds and working our bodies in alignment with the planet and also with the universal energies, in my opinion. So, yeah, we definitely need to start revamping some things. But it really boils down to, are people lazy, or will they, get it together and get it in gear to a point where they start realizing that their whole society is toxic?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to think that we're not that lazy, but some days I think that, and some days I wonder, because you see a lot of apathy in the world, and a lot of people are just kind of, I think there's a problem too with neotenization. I think when you look around, you see a lot of grown people out there still living as though they're children. There's epidemic of people in their 20s and even 30s who are moving back home. And granted, the economy is tough, and sometimes that is somebody's only choice. But I know from just personal friends that sometimes it's not the only choice. Sometimes that's just the choice, because they're in their minds, they're kind of still feeling as though they're needing to be home with their mothers. They're needing to be home with, their video games and their Hot Pockets and their Frankenfoods and whatever else. But I think that there is a real problem. And you see that too with, this, I think, the millennial generation, and I'm not going to, try to label and point fingers, because technically I'm part of that too. So I guess I'm pointing a finger at my own generation. I'm saying, you know what? We need to get it together, because we're starting to come up now into positions where we should be, we should be doing more. We should not be sitting around still looking forward to the premiere of a certain video game or something. This is getting ridiculous. Historically, if you look at somebody in their 30s, my goodness, they would have already had, careers and families and doing things. But now it just seems to be the case where people are just apathetic or neotenized. They still feel that they need to lean on parents or society. And I just, I think that works out pretty well if you're looking for a big group of, a generation that likes to be controlled, essentially. They like to have a parental figure. They like that kind of thing. So if you breed a whole bunch of people who enjoy their captivity, then who better to control? So I think that there is a problem with apathy, neotenization. I think part of that is that people don't even realize. I think people are so entrenched in this culture that a lot of times they don't even realize. But again, there are hope. Like you said, the alternative media is on the rise. I think that a lot of people are getting the picture.
Yeah, they really are. A lot of people are starting to get more stimulated by truth. And, the deception game is a bore. I mean, after a while, people get turned off by liars. I certainly do. So, you can pretty much guarantee that anything comes out of the United States government's a lie. So why bother listening to them anymore? I mean, it's just garbage. But that's another thing too, that complacency, it starts with the parental unit, so to speak, and then all of a sudden it gets delegated to the government right now, which is what's happening, because they're taking the helm and they're trying to control, manipulate the masses. So you've got children growing up and teenagers, and they just keep growing up, and now they're dependent on the government, and that's not the way we're supposed to be at all. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle that I see.
It is. And it's the breakdown of family. And I don't mean that in the political sense, like a traditional family or whatnot. I mean that in a sense of like community. There's an attack on family in general, whether that be, you're in a household with two parents, one parent, grandparents. It doesn't matter. We don't know our neighbors anymore. It used to be you could go and you knew who your neighbors were. You could borrow a cup of sugar, etc.
Yeah.
There is that is a family as well. The neighbors, extended family. There is a breakdown of this kind of cohesion within our own communities. And I think that is also by design. Call me conspiracy theorist, but if you study history, you will see that when the peasants group together, there's an uprising. You don't want the people to have that strong sense of community because that could be dangerous. There's more power in numbers. So it's in your best interest, if you don't want the people to rise up, you want them to be kind of disconnected to one another. You want them to be suspicious of each other. You want them to be apathetic. You want them to be, a whole host of things, but certainly not working together as a community.
Totally true. And people are more and more driven by money too. And there's nothing wrong with money, don't get me wrong, but I see more and more people doing just about anything for money, and that concerns me. There's no ethic. They don't seem to care. They don't have integrity. They'll just do whatever for the cash, So, I understand survival, don't get me wrong, but I think there has to be a benchmark of integrity. And I'm seeing that fall through the cracks as well. So not only is our country being displaced as a society, I'm seeing a lot of greed, a disconnection from source, which is lack of spirituality, lack of spiritual evolution, and of course lack of intellect, because these people aren't educated by anything other than the television. So.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's everybody, but I would say that's a good portion of people in the U.S. right now, quite honestly.
You're right. It is very tough. I'm hoping that, people are kind of getting it together, and we've seen a lot of things go down over the past year or so. People getting together and having protests, and some of which aren't even televised on the news.
Right.
So that, there's something to it. So, it's just, I don't think we ever have had a point where we could totally trust, the powers that be. I think that's just, fantasy. But I think it's important to understand that now with this technology, we're more vulnerable than ever if we allow ourselves to be hypnotized by it. That now messages and images and anything can be just kind of zapped right to you in an instant and then spread like a virus. So we live in a very exciting but also dangerous time for information.
You have to have wisdom when you're using technology, and unfortunately the people that have the access to the technology don't have any wisdom. So that's the shameful part. And of course you're seeing the, it's input-output. It's like a computer, what you program your mind with is what the output's going to be. And take a good look at mainstream. The mainstream society, they act like zombies because that's what the input is. The input is lack of intelligence. It's lack of anything, really. It's just garbage as far as I can tell. But I don't want to go on this big spiral of bashing, but while I'm at it. No,
it's true, though. No, it's definitely a valid point, and it does work its way through all facets of daily life. Things like, how you live, what your community's like, and even things that are more academic or seemingly far removed, like archaeology. All of these things kind of play into the bigger picture like this. And so I think it's important to remain kind of, maybe not bashing, but at least open-minded and skeptical. And it doesn't hurt to have skepticism. That's not a bad word. It's just one of those things where you have to look at things critically and don't trust everything that you're told just because somebody who seems to be in a higher place than you told you so. Because that's the game that's played.
Yeah, Dr. God. I was going to ask you, we talked a little bit off the radio about Arizona. I know we were talking a little bit about the, the things at the Grand Canyon, the Egyptian artifacts. So what is your impression of that whole scenario?
I've been asked that before, and I think it's a really interesting idea. Unfortunately, we don't really have much to go on except some newspaper clippings. I don't even know if there's more than one, but I know there's one in particular. So it's really hard to say from one newspaper clipping. But, I've heard a lot of people's accounts, and some people claim that they've, seen these particular caves that these artifacts could have been buried in. And, but of course, that's all just what people have said. So, and just thinking about it, there's a couple things that come to my mind. First is, well, like we were talking about trust and distrust in the government, the body that was supposedly involved in this is the Smithsonian Institute. And, well, I don't know how much you can trust them, given that they are part of the government. They're run by the government. So, that they're not, so how much can you trust them? I don't know. Also, just general ineptitude. They may have just lost records. People sometimes aren't always looking to just cover things and, have conspiracies. Sometimes the conspiracy is that people are just plain inept and they lose things and they don't know where things are, and they point the finger of blame at everyone, and they, push people under the bus, and it's just, so there's no telling with that. So just because the Smithsonian may come out and say, oh, we don't have any record of that, that doesn't necessarily put my mind at ease. Mm-hmm. But one thought that I've had about this, if there's truth to this idea that there were Egyptian artifacts found in the American West in a cave, the person that was noted as the explorer that found it, there were two gentlemen, and one was an explorer that I think was either working for the Smithsonian or had been given grant money by the Smithsonian, and the other was a supposed professor. So a lot of people try to find, through Freedom of Information Acts and different things, who these people were, what their affiliations were, and where are they now. And there's some interesting, there's some people who've written some interesting things saying that they may have found them and whatever. But my theory is not really a theory. This is like a hunch or just an interesting thought, perhaps. But what if the explorers were not men, but they were women? And I say this because it was very common in the 18th and 19th century for female scientists or explorers or any other kind of more, more ballsy career, they would use male pseudonyms in order to get their research or their work either funded or at least taken seriously or even published. And a lot of these women were maybe society women, or they just had, better backgrounds with which they had money to spend and resources that they could do these things and not have to be on homesteads and taking care of babies. But they had an adventurous mind, maybe money to back it. But that wasn't enough because, you do the research, you put it out, but you're a woman. Nobody's going to listen to you. So it was very common in that time for women to go under pseudonyms. And so that's one thought that I have, that while everybody's kind of looking in this direction, trying to find who these men were, maybe they need to be looking around over to the other direction and finding who the woman was that found this. And I say this too because in the accounts, they claim that the gentleman that found, his name was G.E. Kincaid. They say that this gentleman was the first white child born in the area. And the interesting part about that is the actual census data from that time put the first white child born in that area as being a female. So the female, and this particular female, she had family ties to industry. She and her family worked for the government. They worked very closely with the local Native Americans and doing things like linguistics and whatnot. So, they were very, they were very happening. They weren't just sitting on the homestead and churning butter. They were doing things. They were actively involved in, information gathering and doing these types of things. So later, her family was involved in establishing one of the first local universities. So they were very interested in academic matters. They were funded then with the help of Andrew Carnegie. And many people know who he is. He was a crony to the Rockefellers. So, big money, industry money, giving grants to startup colleges. So it's just one of those things where you never know. Some people could be looking over here. You might want to look in another direction if there's any truth to this. Mm-hmm. That's a big if, because seriously, there's just not a lot to go on. But I have entertained the thought, wouldn't it be interesting if this particular situation was that it was a woman that found this, and that they published it under the male pseudonym? And so,
right.
A lot of people don't talk about that because, yeah,
you'd be a good detective.
Well,
highly possible. Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. So, I thought about looking into that a little bit and maybe doing a blog post or something on it. But
yeah, you might
get people go, just to get them to kind of maybe think a little, because I think part of this is when you look at these stories, the first thing you start wondering about are the artifacts. But I think first you have to let's look at all of the supposed facts of the situation. Question everything, even whether or not this was male or female. We don't know these things for sure. All we have to go on are some, loose accounts and some newspaper clippings. So anything is possible. But I think that more work could be done on that. I don't know, how much more evidence could be found, especially if there was any type of cover-up. But I think it's worth a look.
It's one big Monopoly game, isn't it? I feel like throwing the board, honestly. After a while, doesn't it just feel like a game from hell? I swear.
It's, Monopoly was a long game.
It is. It never ends. We're heading for a break. We'll be right back. Ravenstar Switching Hour with my special guest, Dr. Heather Lynn. Stay tuned.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. The heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Now, do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting the danger, unafraid, right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody. This is Solaris BlueRaven with Ravenstar's Witching Hour, and my special guest this evening is Dr. Heather Lynn. If y'all would like to call in, the number is 347-688-2902 or Freedom Screen on Skype. And Heather, there's a question for you from the chat room, and I went ahead and pasted it over here. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Where would you paste it?
No, it's right here. Here's let's see who that was from. Okay, can you ask Dr. Lynn if she is familiar with Judakula Rock in western North Carolina? Apparently, with the Cherokee people, which predates, and there's a link.
No, actually. I wonder if this is, I think somebody contacted me about this once before. No, I am not.
Okay, that's from Karen K. Thank you, Karen. Okay, so you might want to check out the link and see if it has anything.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you have any information on that, you can always send it to me at Dr.HeatherLynn.com. I'd be glad to take a look at anything.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. And you also just, do you have another website besides the one I mentioned?
DrHeatherLynn.com. Okay. And if you also go to archaeologytruth.org, you can find... it's not launched yet completely, but you can find you can at least track the progress and sign up for information on the launch of STAR, Society for Truth and Archaeological Research. So that's archaeologytruth.org.
Great. I'm looking forward to that. So when is that going to be officially completed? Or
you know, that we're looking at probably a December launch. Okay. So trying to get some people. We had some board members leave and different things happen. Somebody got called overseas to do some things, and so we had a little shuffle in the management. So we're trying to get it all together and work on that 501, C3 or what have you, all the legal jargon. So we're trying to get that together. So as soon as that's together, we're going to be set to launch.
Sweet. Keep me informed on that.
Oh, I definitely will. It's it's all about the in the government aspects of it.
Well, yeah, good luck with all that. Yeah, does that hurt you at all when they do their little, well, obviously the government never really shut down, and we all know that, except for the few national parks. And,
so far, so good. It's not looking like there's too many problems, fingers crossed. So it's just, it's kind of a time where you just got to wait. You fill out the papers, and it's you got to wait. And then we had to change, the name on one of them. So it's sort of taken a little bit longer than we had initially anticipated. But I think, all good things come to those who wait. So once we launch, we'll be nice and, able to accept donations that will be tax deductible, which is the important thing for people.
Yeah, it's all in motion, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. And so let's talk a little bit about the giant skeletons. I don't know if we ever really touched on this the last time you were on the show, but insofar as the big skeletons that have been found in the United States, what's your impression of that?
Well, honestly,
go ahead.
There's so many of these giant skeletons just everywhere, and people talk about them. And let me just say, there are big remains that are locked away in museums and universities that don't quite fit whether it be a big jawbone or just a large skeleton. There are big anomalous things, but as far as all the giants that are found, especially in the U.S., nowadays when you look online, it's just everywhere. Everyone's just, people are, there's pictures of people who are excavating inside of an eye socket. Like the thing's just so massive, people can fit inside their nostrils. And it's just like, that's called Photoshop and too much time. So to me, a lot of that is, been photoshopped, and in a couple of the images, I have a few Photoshop experts in my back pocket, and they've looked at it, and definitely, just for the sake of argument, because I don't want to just say, oh, well, that's a hoax, because, I want to check out everything, give people the benefit of the doubt, but most of them that I've seen are clear hoaxes, if you want to call them that, just at least photoshopped, that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that I discount the whole idea of giants in particular, but I think the term giant is relative. I think that, someone being 7 to 8 foot tall in stature, I think that, that's something that could physically be possible. I think that if there would be somebody of that stature, they would be a giant. People would look at them as a giant. That would be something. So, it's really hard when you start talking semantics like that, because you have the whole Nephilim issue and the word giant. And some of that is, very subjective to the individual. Like you say giant. To me, a giant's like, the Jolly Green Giant. Like
Jack and the Beanstalk, yeah.
Right. So, but, I'm also 5'2". So if you're 5'8", you're a giant to me. So, giant is a really subjective term, but I think overall, the idea of there being larger people, that really carries weight, no pun intended. I think that if there are societies of people in antiquity and they come across people who are larger than them, that's something notable. It's something they talk about. And like any story, things get kind of, a little exacerbated down the road. It's just like, oh, they're this big. Oh, no, they're that big, But I again, we don't know half of the things that are out there. We don't know. They're finding new remains all the time and just kind of plugging them in on that nice grid of evolution, whether it be very tiny people, very large people, half people, who knows what this is, kind of, remains. So I can't really go so far as to say, oh, well, that's just impossible. But in terms of the actual skeletons and the things that you may find online, especially with pictures of giant skeletons, I think the majority of those, unfortunately, for, some people, I think they're photoshopped. Mm-hmm. Now, I'd be more than happy if somebody has anything, any kind of evidence or proof or just anything. I'd be more than happy if they sent it to me so I could take a look, because, I'm open for a good mystery, but right now I have to say I've not seen anything super convincing that tells me that, there's a bunch of giants all over, but you never know. You never know.
There's a lot of hoopla about it, and I agree with you. I tend to agree with you that a lot of it's photoshopped, and and you look at the basketball players. They're huge. Some of these guys are really big, so it's really not a stretch to say they're 7 feet plus or minus.
Right, it could be giant. If you imagine, especially historically, people were a lot smaller in stature. So if you did, if there were people that had been born and they just had these, they were just larger like this, that would be quite a thing. It'd be very like, whoa, you're a giant. So, I don't want to say that no, there are no giants, because like I said, that's very subjective. But in terms of just, oh gosh, like I said, some of these pictures online are just ludicrous. They're people that are hopping in and out of the eye socket skeletons. It's like clearly the shadowing is off, like the light's coming in from the left on the human, but it's coming in from the right on the. It's awful. It's pixelated.
What's really interesting is, and this is where I had a conversation with a friend of mine. We were talking about basically taking responsibility for information, and that if you're putting information that's disinformation out to the masses, you're taking a karmic hit on some level. So I think people really need to take, whether they're in alternative media or not, they really need to take a second look and be a little more analytical about some of the things they're observing through the internet. And it's just, I see that a lot. I see a lot of people just going out and talking about this and that with really, it's just kind of a fantasy at this point in the continuum, unless you have some really concrete evidence. And then there's another thing that comes to mind, is how much of the stuff they're digging up now is actually just, not even valid. Insofar as some of the skeletons they're digging up, I'm wondering if those have just been planted, just for entertainment purposes only. You know what I mean?
And then there have been cases where, struggling people in different countries or different, cultures, they understand the, monetary value on discoveries like that.
Right.
So sometimes they, it's been known that people will kind of put together hoaxes, to not try to necessarily pull one over on people to be completely malicious. You got to understand, some of these people are desperate. They're desperate to feed their families. They do these things to hope that maybe they'll get some sort of, compensation, or they can charge money, or, here, like a freak show, here's, give me some money and you can view this like, ancient king, or this, whatever it may be, or a giant. So,
or a tooth.
Right. So, I mean, you just really have to kind of be very skeptical on that stuff. But I think nowadays, at least I would hope, it's getting a lot easier, because a lot of these things, it's just, I don't know, it just looks so ridiculous that, but man, some people are getting fooled by this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it is hard. And I think that for those who are genuinely interested in studying the idea of giants and the history of giants, I think that it is a shame that these pictures are out here flooding the internet and discrediting the work that they're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. Like you said, it's disinformation. So you might be onto something interesting, and then all of a sudden the disinformation comes flooding in, and then you're guilty by association, so to speak.
Yeah, and the waters get muddied once again, and I see that a lot right now with alternative media. Unfortunately, you get everybody jumping on the bandwagon, and I'm sure sometimes their intentions are good, but at the same time, it's recklessness. And you have to be, as a journalist or as a researcher, you really have to be responsible and articulate and intelligent and analytical to some degree with this information. You can't just throw it around. So
absolutely.
I mean, that's my impression anyway.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think a lot of people are just throwing it around. I think due to the relative ease and accessibility of programs like Photoshop, and then just people have always had this urge to trick people. I mean, there's always been hoaxes and different things. So, you get that in the hands of somebody who thinks they're being tricky, and they put out all this disinformation, and it really has a negative effect on things in a larger scheme. So it's not always harmless to put out these types of hoaxes. Some, maybe young people or immature people think, oh, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm just kind of making a joke. It could be potentially hurtful. It could really hurt researchers and their attempts. It could also hurt a locality and their, preservation of their historic area. If you start telling everybody, oh, here there are these giants buried and what have you, and then you get a lot of people coming out there to try to infringe on that land or the people. And it could really cause a lot of problems. So I think that, yeah, like you said, people need to take responsibility for these things. And so it's really, but yeah, the giants, that's a tough one. Cause I know there's so many people out there who really are like, oh yeah, these are so, but no, I have to say, from my personal opinion, the majority of these are like extremely Photoshop, just absolutely crazy Photoshop. So
yeah, they look that way for sure. I was going to ask you also, what's your take on the Holy Grail? Have you done much research in that area?
I've not done serious research in that area. I've done enough research in at least, knowing some of the stories and the myths. But that's another one. That one is, people could write, I think, volumes on that one from here to eternity. Everybody has an opinion on that. Me personally, I really don't have an opinion on that. I'm open to all different things. I've heard, I love the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. I'll just say that right there. That is something that I really love. Now, I'm not going to say that I think that, oh yes, this explains it all and this is absolutely 100% accurate. But I think that, wow, that one was really interesting.
Yeah, it was a good book. I like that one too.
It was a good one. So, yeah, I think that it's still open for interpretation. I think that the idea that the Grail, just in terms of the linguistics of it, when you break down what they were talking about, that it was not necessarily a cup. I think that really is that's a key point to consider, because so many things have been lost in translation.
Yeah. It's all code. Everything's written in code. At least some of the stuff that they didn't want to be, deciphered was written in code. Then the other stuff, a lot of it's disinformation. But I always wonder about things like that also. Is that what people perceive on this timeline, or what they were perceiving on that timeline is not necessarily what they were writing about?
Oh, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, different.
You got to put things into that context too, in terms of what culture this is coming from and what era, and what things are significant to them at the time, and how just the actual like grammar of it. How did they speak? How do they refer to things? So it's sometimes a lot of information can be literally lost in translation along the way, so that we interpret it as one thing, but it could really mean something completely different.
Right. Yeah, I always talk about like going into like a time machine and coming back in 100 years and seeing what this whole planet's like, because everything's such a lie anyway. And I'm thinking, how could you possibly look back and say, oh, look, they must have been talking about this or this. I'm like, it was all a lie anyway. So enjoy it, if you sit there and try to decode it.
I agree so much. I've often thought how funny it would be to, look at the artifacts we've left behind, and archaeologists in the future, if they find things like all the commercial things that we have, like characters like Mickey Mouse or whatever, I mean, they're going to think that we worship giant mice or something. It's just unbelievable. Because everything, of course, comes down to some sort of ritual. In archaeology, when you don't understand what you're looking at, it's like ritual. That's what it is. So it's the default. Well, this is ritual. A lot of times the default is this is fertility ritual. So this is a fertility god or goddess. So I imagine down the road, they're going to find like, Disneyland things and say Disney World or what have you, as like a giant shrine to our fertility gods and goddesses, Mickey and Minnie Mouse, and you could just go on a heyday of like misconceptions. So I often wonder about that too. Another thing that's interesting, I think it was Discovery Channel like some years back, I'm not quite sure, one of those channels, they had a show called After Humans. That was entertaining. It showed all these different ideas of how things would just sort of decay, and how nature would reclaim cities if something happened and we were gone, and it would take like no time.
Oh, that's right. I think I did see that. Is that when everything starts getting overgrown?
Yes.
Yeah, I did see that. It was very good.
If you've ever been through, parts of the Rust Belt during this time in our economy, things like Detroit and what have you, you can see that, yes, things are being reclaimed. All of nature just has a way of just taking over an area, and it looks like nothing was ever there.
Yep.
And so I just sometimes think, how much did they have that we will never even know, because it is just, we can't get it back. We won't be able to excavate enough to actually find the evidence of what it was that we had. So how much is actually lost to history? It could be an immeasurable amount of things that have been lost to history. So I just find it very interesting. So
it's a good point you made. And also I think about Mexico City, where they've had all those earthquakes and so many different levels of the city was rebuilt, It kind of reminds me of that. I mean, insofar as just so many things have been consumed throughout the illusion of time. So who knows? But, for all we know, DC will be a nice big skating rink or something funny, 100 years from now. I still want my time machine. I want to check it out, come back. But there'll be Morlocks living underground. That will be all they all.
Oh, goodness.
NSA will be Morlock.
I've seen more Morlocks above ground than underground lately.
Isn't it true? Yeah.
Yeah,
zombie. We were talking about zombies the other day, and a lot of people are acting like zombies, I swear.
I am really intrigued by this whole zombie thing. I mean, what is this? This is a definite commentary on our culture. This whole rise in the popularity of zombies. I think it's really something. I think it reflects sort of the maybe the mindset of the time, that maybe it's some sort of, actual just commentary of the state of our apathetic selves, that we're just really drawn to the idea of zombies.
Well, they're the Walking Dead to some degree. I mean, people are the Walking Dead. If they're not alive in spirit, they're dead.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that there's a lot of Morlocks and zombies running around here. We got to do something about that.
I'm telling you. All right, I'm on a mission to hunt zombies. No, seriously. But I was going to ask you, we were talking a little bit about paranormal history and Halloween trivia, which of course would be Samhain for me. But what's your take on the archaeological sites you've done or actually observed and the history of that, if any?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. There is archaeology for that. There's a couple different things that come to my mind. First, there have been, well, let me put it this way. It gets mixed up with Halloween now, because that is just, the prevalent culture, and it's what's happened. It's just been kind of merged into Halloween, and now we look at Halloween as this spooky, scary time and whatever. But if you really look at the history of this, it goes so much further. And it was also kind of a spooky, scary time, but it was in balance. Everything was in balance. It there were more positive aspects to it than just, frights and scares. The idea was that, the evil spirits that could be, roaming around during that time, they could be warded off by the good spirits. It was more of a celebration of the dead, the past, the ancestors, things like that. So it really, if you look at it, it wasn't as trivial as just, spooky monsters and scary ghosts. It was a very sacred day that people felt that they had the possible connection to their loved ones. I mean, imagine your family's gone, and it's never been easy for people to lose loved ones. So here you have a time of the year where you're told that this is the time where the veil between the afterlife and the now is the thinnest, and so those spirits can actually get to you. I mean, what an appealing thought that here you have the potential to be reunited with your loved ones. And so it was actually a joyous occasion. Now, there were some, scares that could be involved, because along with that thin veil could be, different evil spirits or what have you that came in there. But for the most part, it was celebrated as a whole host of positive things. And, it marked the end of the old year. And that was very important. And so, and I think what this comes down to in terms of archaeology, if you want to include like ancient texts and different things, classical authors such as Strabo and even Caesar himself had a real knack for painting what they called heathens and barbarians as just brutal people. They just, and you got to look at the source, consider the source. It was more of a leveling tactic because, they feared those people. They feared them because, they were a close-knit group. They were very family, community oriented. They had a lot of cultural tradition, and they were very powerful in terms of, their warrior capabilities. So there was always like, anti-pagan type propaganda out there. And so something that's interesting is this whole idea of, say, the Wicker Man. And Caesar claimed that there were tribes that would have these colossal images of like wicker men made of wicker, the limbs of which they'd fill with living people, and then they'd set them on fire and leave their victims to burn to death. That's really like, oh yeah, that's terrible, Well, it's because it's a vivid description and it's super scandalous. And it just makes for a good story. Mm-hmm. But there's literally no archaeological evidence to support that at all. In fact, the consensus is that such a thing like a Wicker Man would be structurally impossible. And so there have been some attempts at, experimental archaeology where they've tried to even just build such a thing. And, it doesn't, you can do like Burning Man and stuff. But in terms of the way that the classical text described the structure in which this was used to burn people, it just wouldn't be possible. So that's the archaeological perspective on that. It is just often seen as kind of like an anti-Gaelic propagandist attempt. Mm-hmm. So, and another thing that has to do with sacrifices, you get a lot of that whole like, blood sacrifice and witches. It's time. Well, again, archaeology, it does support there were sacrifices, but the evidence points to the sacrifice of cattle, something that's super common in most of the world and was a very important part of the ancient Samhain practices. It was celebrated, around November 1st at that time. So like I said, it marked the end of the old year, the beginning of the new year. And it was presumably the most important festival of the year for a lot of different reasons. One thing, though, that was really important then was the idea that the cattle, they had, all this cattle that needed to be, I guess, managed in terms of meat production, for lack of a better word. They needed to be slaughtered. So, I mean, the culture of the time, they were like an agro-pastoral, culture. They needed to, they farmed the land, they had the cattle. So the sacrifices that were always referred to, especially by Caesar and others, they were actually killing the surplus of cattle before the winter months really kicked in. Because if you have a ton of cattle and it's winter, what are you going to feed the cattle? You can't afford, even now, you can't afford, especially if you're in that situation, you don't have these huge like grain stocks and stores. And if you did, that's good eating for people. So you really needed to consider where your resources went. So you would have to look at the situation and say, you know what, we're not going to be able to carry these cows over, through the winter months. Not to mention, those are good eating. We're going to just slaughter all those, stock up. And what they would do is they'd make a nice sacrifice. And they were known for having these big public feasts. They were like community feasts. So they'd have a sacrifice, and like many cultures did this with sacrificing, cattle or different animals. It would be more of a, there's a misconception where when you sacrifice, it was just you pretty much wasted it. You just burn it up. But that's not true. The idea of sacrifice was that you ritualistically killed the animal and then ate it. So it was more of an appreciation for the animal's life.
Reminds me of the Native Americans a little bit too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what they did. They sacrificed the cattle for the meat, and they had a nice big party, and it was a good time. People were very happy and grateful, and it was, they minded their own business. They did their own thing, but people, like Caesar was known for writing about, you'd see, he would say, you could see piles and piles of dead bodies burning. Yeah, well, the dead bodies were cows. I mean, there's archaeological evidence is there to support that. So all the time in history, you have, propaganda talking about one group against the other, always trying to paint people out to be barbarians. And so it's one of those things where, even now those images permeate the mainstream, and that's like witches with brooms. And that's another one that's misunderstood due to pastoral religions. You're probably familiar with the whole idea of witches on brooms and where that came from. But for anyone that isn't familiar, I mean, it's believed that came from a fertility rite that was performed to induce crops to grow really high. So like the people would mount on pitchforks or poles and brooms, and they'd ride them around like horses on the field, leaping really high in the air, and they would just be having a great time. And it was sort of like a fun contest, like who could jump the highest. And that would sort of be an indicator of how high your crops could grow. And so it was just kind of a fun community event, almost like potato sack races, if you will. I mean, it was a little more serious than that, but it's still kind of a thing that was a culturally accepted, fun, festive time. Well, a lot of these things would be witnessed by people, and then they'd be twisted into tales. Like they'd see them in the horizon line, and they'd see witches riding on brooms high up into the air. And so basically what you're looking at in a lot of those situations, it's unfortunate as it is, but it's purely racism. It's bigotry, it's stereotyping, and it's propaganda against people who maybe you just don't understand. And unfortunately, that's carried over into some of our, traditions now.
Yeah, I think fear is the biggest driver in this whole thing. Is fear of not understanding what truth is, fear of the unknown, fear of what people do. Just people are driven by it. It's a real toxic type of emotional, attachment people have. But I see that the most in this civilization. Yeah, I mean, we've used brooms in actually of recent, but I mean, differently now. But of course, it's interesting to look back on that timeline and just see, and there was more of a sense of community. You were talking about community earlier, and it does seem like they did have a community insofar as working together to make better crops and harvests, and celebrating the earth and celebrating the elements more than you see it now, for sure, except for pagan communities and things like that.
Yeah, there've always been. That's always been something very important, and that's historically the case with those types of agricultural type cultures where they've been very close knit, and they usually have folk religions. They usually have folk stories and very rich cultures, but they're based in a very community oriented thing, and it's sort of threatening to some people, because if you don't understand it, and if it's not part of your like mainstream belief set or something that's been politically condoned or accepted, well, it's easy to pick on those types of people as the, disenfranchised or the weird ones out, but I think it has a lot to do too with the simplicity factor, because a lot of those, given the fact that they were in agriculture and very close to the earth, very in tune with the seasons, celebrating things like, the change in the seasons and, all of these different things in relation to being very close to the cosmos and the earth. I think that type of connection, that's been something that a lot of bigger, empires, if you will, like bigger governments start to look down on, like they're the simple folk. They live off the land. They're ignorant. They don't have, we see that even now where, you got the country folk that live out in the, they're farmers. They don't know anything. It seems as though when you're associated with living close to the earth or maybe off the grid in some way, or you have that sense of community or family, it somehow makes you less than. And I think that that's been a struggle that, people have had for a very long time, that whole separation between that urban, lifestyle, the maybe elitist thinking, if you will, compared to the simple human, tendencies to want to just live in peace, live off the land, enjoy things that life has to offer, have festivities, and so I think that that's been a common battle, and it's unfortunate, but I think we still see it today. And there are traditions that are good that, we got from that. And then there's traditions that are, a lot of things like, there's a resurgence in neo-paganism and people who are wanting to go back to that kind of, being in tune with the earth and just really getting in touch with what it means to be, human in that way. And I think that, it's probably pretty offensive, I would imagine, for a lot of this kind of Halloween stuff to be pushed and not enough of maybe the more historically accurate aspects of it.
Yeah, well, coming from a Wiccan background myself, we just kind of ignore it. But there's so much paranoia and fear is what we really see. And, I've been really stepping up insofar as trying to educate people a little bit more insofar as what it's like to be a witch and what we actually do. And, it's like, but anyways, they'll eventually get over it, but it's all about fear and it's about their programming and their perception of reality. And so they're comfortable in that zone and they don't want to move out of that bubble, a lot of these people. So that's where they're at. But eventually it's going to hurt them in the long run because they need to really grow and evolve spiritually. And they're not willing to do that. And it's not just about accepting witches or Wicca. It's about accepting anyone in any form or design on a higher level of consciousness that's different than yourself. So I really think that people need to awaken to that, but who knows when that's going to transpire.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that we do need to have kind of a more inclusive, approach to things. And I think once we do, I think we'll realize that we're really not that different. There's a lot of us think that, everybody who has some different background or different interests, or just, it's really like, oh my gosh, they're totally different people. I don't understand them. They don't understand me. But I think when you really, take the labels away and the misconceptions, and if you were just set people together in a room, you'd find that there's more commonalities than there are differences. Right. One of my favorite quotes is from Nietzsche. And some people wouldn't even like the fact that I'm quoting Nietzsche, but he had some great quotes. And one of them is, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist."
Nice. Yeah.
That's
well
what I
said.
think.
Well, when you think about it, I think everybody really just wants to be happy for the most part, unless they're psychotic. I mean, most people who live on this planet just want to have a happy life. They want to be at peace. They want their little piece of land, and they want their nice little life. And, that's really, I think that's all people really want. And unfortunately, we're being encroached upon by, corporate governments and things like that, which are really just so abnormal. But, I think in the bigger scheme of things, I think people just want to be happy. And if you can't find happiness on this world just by living and breathing the air, then, man, we're in deep trouble.
That is a great point. And I think that is a stellar point. I think that the whole idea that people just want that simplicity, I think that is true. But I think the problem, too, is that with all this kind of glamour that we're being exposed to in the sense of just media and, all these messages and I guess the matrix, if you will, we're sort of being told that, no, that is not what you want. This is what you want. You want wealth. You want bling. You want whatever it is, that the media is telling you it's hip and cool and trendy. You want big houses. You want whatever. We're being told what we want all the time. And you know how many people have actually achieved these things and have been miserable because of it? Because it's not really what they want.
Excuse me, yeah. That's exactly it. Money, you can't take it with you, bottom line, even though I'm sure it buys you a lot of nice toys and buys a lot of people a lot of corruption because through money, there's a lot of corruption involved with a lot of money. So, but at the same time, you have to pick and choose. And to me, it seems like a waste of living if you can't live on a higher level of spirit and anchored on the world. If you have to appreciate life for what it is. And I think the quality of life has been so it's been downgraded to such a degree right now that people are not able to live the quality of life they're supposed to be living. I mean, it's just not happening. So that's really sad when I watch that.
Oh, absolutely. It is. And I think that, I think that there's going to be a point, we're going to hit a critical mass where more and more people start feeling that pressure and start thinking, I don't want this. And maybe they have to, go back and reassess what it is they really want and what's important to them. I think we're coming upon a renaissance. I really do. I really feel optimistic about it. Whether I'm going to, whether it's going to be like in our lifetime or what, I would hope that it will be, but I at least think we're heading in the right direction. It's just a matter of getting the momentum behind it.
I'd like to see that, actually. And the entrepreneurs, I mean, the genius minds that weren't infiltrated by these corrupt cabals. I mean, there are brilliant people on this planet if you just give them some breathing room on a spiritual level and an analytical level to grow and evolve without censorship. I mean, that's where brilliant minds come from, and now they're being shut down or taken out. I mean, that's been the old way of doing things anyway. Whenever someone was very intelligent, they would just take them down because they were a threat. But I see that again. I see the parallel just keep going and going. And so I think the biggest problem we have right now on this planet is the corporate governments and the cabals that are just out of control. And hopefully we can do something to just kind of negate them.
Absolutely. And, I think that the real power lies within the masses. And once we realize that there are more of us than there are of them, we can really kind of come together and quit the infighting and the bickering over like who believes what, who thinks what, whose side is this, and I'm on this side, left side, right side, whatever side, and stop and say this is all a distraction. Let's join together and rise up and go right for it and take back our lives and bring that renaissance on. Yeah. We can do it. We have that power.
I agree. It's taking back power, and that's a perfect thing you just said, because I think the people have given their power to corporate cabals right now and corporate government. We have delegated too much power to them. They have stolen power, and not just them, but other areas involved also. But it's time to take that power back. It is time to reclaim our own heritage and power, and we do that through community, through awareness, education, and really just kind of saying no to the illusion.
Absolutely. Yes. Say no to the illusion. As you said earlier, we are co-creators in this universe. Mm-hmm. We can make whatever we want happen, essentially. This is something I've learned. This is something that I cover in Anthrotheology. I have learned that when you want something and you really put your energies behind it, you can make it happen, even if you feel powerless. You first have to have that positive attitude. You have to put faith. You have to put it out to the universe. You have to believe in it. You have to live it like it's already so. You have to let it be. Just do it. And things will start happening around you. People can literally make almost anything they want happen just by conceiving it and believing it and making it happen. And I know it sounds like, some self-help guru stuff, but I have to say, I have seen it work in my personal life. I have seen it, I was homeless at one point. I had nothing at one point. I lost my family. I lost everything. I was stuck before in a small efficiency apartment with no heat, with no money and no job and no car. And I had no future. I had no education. I had nothing. And I had a very short moment to just be in this little efficiency apartment by myself. I had just lost my mother. I had just lost a husband. I had lost everything I had ever known. I had lost my identity because, as a person, you're labeled. Your identity comes from your labels. You're, a daughter, a wife, whatever. I was nothing at that point. Everything was taken from me within 2 months.
Wow.
And I was stuck in a city that I didn't even know where I was. It's a long story, and you can read about it more in the book. But I found myself in a position of seemingly just hopelessness. And it just kind of dawned on me that, what? For all this loss, I really just, there's nothing left, is there? And in a way, I don't know if I was maybe going crazy in that moment, but if I did, thank goodness, because I thought, here I have nothing to lose because I've lost it all. Other than my physical life, I have nothing to lose. And that freed me to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. And so I did. I went straight in. I signed up for college, which in and of itself was no small feat. I went into community college initially, and I was scared. I was all by myself. I didn't even know the first step into applying, or how do I even get, do I qualify for financial aid? I didn't have parents helping. I had nobody. And I had to walk in there, and I was scared and insecure. And I was like, well, I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to do what I can do. And I just thought, now that my labels have been stripped from me, now that I have nothing, it's up to me to determine who I'm going to be. I'm going to make my own labels. I am going to recreate myself in the image that I want. And that all started with me. And that's what everybody can do. Everybody can do. But you first have to let go of what anyone has ever told you are, because that's what they think you are.
Yep.
You have to make the choice to say, no, this is who I am. This is what I can do. And it's not like an overnight thing, but you have to point yourself in that direction and take it step by step. And before you know it, you can self-actualize to the point where you can look in the mirror and say, you know what? I recognize who this is. This is the person I created. This is me. And no one can take that from me now.
Bravo. Yeah, I applaud you for all that you have done. And you know what? It seems that we've had a similar parallel. I've lost everything also, and you just recalibrate and you set a new course. And I think that takes a lot of strength and determination, quite honestly, and not many people can do that. And hopefully they will if they ever get in that position. But it really does take a lot of strength to do what you've done. So I applaud you for that, Heather. You've done a wonderful job. So I'm really happy for you. You deserve every bit of success you have, and brilliant mind, very articulate and intelligent. It's so nice to see a woman who's bright and intelligent in the archaeological field. So yeah, that's fabulous. I'm very proud of you.
Well, I appreciate that, and that is another thing I want to stress in this in Anthrotheology. It's something that, as I said, it was more of my personal journey. So there's a lot of more of my personal story in there, and and how the quest for answers kind of led me down a path of inquiry, and how I've sort of, figured things out, at least thus far, for myself. And maybe my goal is this: if this book can pique the interest of some people, and they get it and they read it and it's interesting enough, and then they get some helpful advice in it that could possibly help them put themselves on a track of self-actualization, then it was just worth it. And then some. Even just one person, if it can just change the minds and the outlook of one person, I think that it'll be so worth it. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, I like your method too, because you are analytical and you're very grounded. And I think a lot of people who are on the fence about spirituality or consciousness are more analytical. So they really need somebody they can relate to, and through their writing that will kind of, they can understand the lingo and then be, able to activate on a higher level of consciousness as well. So I think that's wonderful. I'm looking forward to reading that book. So yeah, so happy Samhain. So which is New Year. Your book is released in live.
Absolutely.
Then you said you were just doing a television series, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about that real quick?
Oh, well, yeah, I went out to LA this last weekend, actually, to do some scenes for Ancient Aliens. So
sweet. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that should be fun. I really enjoy the experience. It was great. The people are amazing. The people behind the show are just, they're phenomenal. I'm very skeptical, very leery of anything mainstream. So, and I had some people who contacted me and said, "Oh no, don't do it. They're just gonna, they're them." And so, I'm open to anything though, because sometimes they are them, and you gotta go in before you can make a judgment. So, I go in with an open mind. But let me tell you, I came out of there with this newfound respect for what it is they're trying to do, because they were not at all, contrary to what some people may think, they were not at all trying to push any agenda or do anything. They were so kind and so good to me, telling me, you know what, we want your real opinion. And I heard him say that to other people. We want your thoughts. We're trying to show your opinion. So nobody pressured me to say anything that I wouldn't want to say. Nice. There was no conspiracy behind it. I was quite impressed with the production. Everybody was great. And I'm really looking forward to the show's premiere. So, I'm not sure which ones, when they'll be or, but I think they might be coming in, I don't know, sometime in the winter, I'm sure. But they film so many in advance, and so who knows which ones they'll use and what they'll do. So it has yet to be seen, but for anyone who's interested, tune in on Mondays, 10 p.m. on History Channel.
Well, History Channel's good. I mean, that's that's okay. This is the mainstream garbage, those reality shows and all that other crap that they throw out there.
Oh, it's all, I don't watch much TV.
I don't even own a television.
Oh, you're great. I own a Roku. That is how I get my television, because I don't want commercials. I don't want to be told what to watch. I like to have the access to just choose what I want to see when I want to see it, so I don't have to go through all that stuff. So I love that, the little Roku box. Oh my gosh, it's like the greatest thing ever. So
yeah, you have to be in control. That's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I try to filter That's another thing too, all the commercials that are out there just drive me crazy. I used to work, years ago in marketing, and I have just burnt out on that whole game of trying to trick people into buying things. It's just so off-putting. I just can't stand it. I can't even stand to see commercials. So I like not having to deal with those. But yeah, no, but the show was really great. I'm really looking forward to it. And like I said, the people behind it are really great. And I've gotten a lot of flack here and there for doing it. I think a lot of people were hoping that I wouldn't go down that road. But I say, why not? It's a platform in which to share beliefs and share ideas. And if it gets people interested in some of the ideas, even if it just gets people's interest in going in things like archaeology, I'm all for it. I think that the best way to reach people is through something entertaining, something they enjoy. There's no sense in boring people to death, So
I think the History Channel, it used to be okay. I'm sure it's still pretty good, but I'm wondering if mainstream's not catching on to the alternative media and realizing that it's more appealing to try to grab someone who is alternative media or actually truth-based versus what they're used to putting out. So maybe that's one of the reasons they're changing their format a little bit. Who knows? But that's good. I mean, if they're waking up and they're starting to smell the coffee, that's great. Now if we can get our news teams to do that in mainstream, we'd be really happy.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know, we'll see. But
it's kind of like Pinocchio, they're just a bunch of liars. I could go on about DC, but I guess I won't right now. But yeah, it's quite amazing. So one more time, let everybody know your website and how they can get a hold of you, because we're getting ready to wrap this up soon enough.
Oh, okay. It is drheatherlynn.com. It's pretty easy. If anybody wants to contact me, you can email me at heather@drheatherlynn.com. It's my direct email. The only thing I ask is that you be patient, because I seriously get a crazy amount of emails, and sometimes I just can't get to them all as soon as they come in. But I always go through and just have designated email days. I respond to everybody, but it might take a little bit, but I will respond. I promise I will always respond to even the most outlandish seeming inquiry. I don't care. I will respond, but just give me a moment. So if you want to email me, that's heather@drheatherlynn.com. And my website has a blog. It has information about me, and it has, archive shows I've been on and different things. So, and it also has updates on archaeology news as it happens. So it'll be updated throughout days and the evenings, whenever. So it's a constant feed of the latest in discoveries and archaeology news from around the world. So that's drheatherlynn.com.
That's wonderful. And do you collaborate with other archaeologists?
I have for different projects. I am very much open to that, especially if there's, some different projects that are going on research-based. So I'm open to collaboration, definitely. In the past, I've done that. So nothing majorly big, I would say. More just small kind of papers and presentations. But, I'm open to collaboration, sure. I think the more people work on a project, the more minds, the more effort, the more energy, the better the outcome. So bring it on.
Yeah, I think that's great. I was thinking that would be nice if you collaborated with a book sometime with another archaeologist or something, but who knows, that might come down the pike for you.
Oh, yeah, you know what? I have had some ideas for that. So that would be very fun. I'd be very much open to that. So I did, I don't know that it's so much collaboration, but I wrote the foreword for an upcoming book called Viral Mythology. Nice. It's by Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman. So it's, I'm really looking forward to that book. They really did a good job on this one. The subject matter is just... oh, it's so exciting. I cannot wait. And so I think that comes out in January. So definitely take a look at Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman's Viral Mythology. That's excellent. Can't wait.
Sweet. Wow, you have a lot. There are a lot of books there I'm going to have to read. I'm so behind in my reading right now with all my books, I swear.
It's so hard, isn't it?
It's like that Twilight Zone episode where he has all the books,
Oh yeah.
Except my glasses, don't let them break. You know?
Totally telling that, man. That's good time. I thought about that. I was on the plane coming back, and it was nighttime, and I was like very tired because I had a lot of jet lag and a lot of things going on, and I had a window seat by the wing, and I swear to you, all I could think of was that whole "It's on the plane, it's on the wing," that face. Are you familiar with that episode?
Yeah. Oh yeah, with Captain Kirk. Yeah, William Shatner.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's classic.
Oh, that one! I'm telling you what, that one still gives me goosebumps. Anytime I sit near a wing of a plane, I'm just like, oh, I could just see it now. It's on the wing.
It's supposed to be one of the safer spots on the plane, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, I could be wrong.
As long as there's no creatures out there, I'm good.
Well, that's really funny. Wow. Yeah. So, well, we've got a few more minutes here before I make a few announcements. But so, have you thought much about the lost city of Atlantis?
Oh gosh, you know. I have thought about that. Yes, absolutely. I there are so many theories on that. You know who has an interesting take on that is oh goodness, what is his name? Gosh, his name's escaping me now. But there is somebody came out with a book. I think it's called Atlantis in America, and I'm not sure who the gentleman was that wrote that at this time. His name just like totally left my mind. But no, there's some really good books out there about it. But the problem with it is there's just so much, you know. It's like, where could it have been? Was it water? Was it, you know, whatever? But I always refer to the actual, you know, historic text where that came from, and it's really, yeah, it's a really tough thing to say. It could be a number of things. So the amount of research I've done on it probably doesn't reflect the amount that others have done. So I'm not.
That's okay. I figured I'd throw that at you just to see what your impression was of that.
I'm not against the idea of there being an Atlantis. I know this, but you know, I just don't know that anyone has really said, "Oh, it was here and it was that." And for all we know, it could have been some kind of a myth of you know. I'm not really sure as to what kind of evidence there is to support the idea of physical Atlantis, but yeah, it is very interesting.
Well, I like the fact that you're really grounded, and it's you know, because sometimes you have to have that honesty. You have to have the balance. So I think that's good.
Yeah, I don't discount a lot of things like on first, you know, I got to research it a lot further before I can really say, oh no, this is absolutely crazy. I'm not. But, you know, Atlantis, there are so many, there are so many people who have written on that. So I would say
Casey, and a lot of it was the psychic readings also. And then of course somebody claimed there was a pyramid off of someplace. I forget where it was located now. That was recently, but I'll probably butcher that if I mention it. But anyways, I wanted to, we're getting ready to wrap this up a little bit here. So I just want to thank you again for being on the show. It's always incredible to have you on, Heather. I really, really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, no, not at all. Thank you. I love doing it. This is a great show, and you're such a good host, and it's so much fun.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad. If you need to block anybody, by the way, you know, that's a personal joke. But anyways, what was I going to tell you? Oh yeah, if you want to be back on a regular basis, just let me know, and I'll try to have you back every 3 or 4 months. If you find some unique discoveries or anything you want to share, let me know, and we'll get you back on the show.
Oh, sure. If you'd like, I can put together a nice archaeological update of the latest happenings and news.
That's right. Great. Well, it seems like lots happening with you fast forward, so that's wonderful. And I do want to thank everybody in the chat room tonight. Jerry, you've been wonderful in there, and everybody who's been texting. You know, I haven't been getting a little beep when you guys mention my name, so I'm not sure what's going on. I can't. It doesn't make a noise in the chat room, so I'm not sure what's happening with that. But anyways, I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, everybody at Revolution Radio and the chat room. And my special guest next week is going to be John Storm, and we'll be discussing more of the path of the witch. So that should be very interesting around this time of year. And also stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky coming up next, of course, to sail you into the night from down under. And with that being said, we still have some time here, but I just wanted to kind of make sure I get that out of the way. And I was going to ask you if you have done much archaeological research around cemeteries, old cemeteries.
Oh, you know, those are one of my favorite places to go. You can really learn a lot about it is endless amount of things you can learn just in terms of, you know, exploring them, looking at the names and the tombstones, but then also the feelings that you get. And I'm by no means psychic or anything like this, but you can't help but get feelings when you are in a very old site like that. And I spent some time in Louisiana and some of their old cemeteries, and man, those are something. Those are a sight to be seen. They're beautiful. There's these like large monuments and these family names that go back for so many years, and it's just such rich history that, yeah, there's a lot to be said for cemeteries in general. Another interesting thing about cemeteries is you can do some digital exploration of that. There's many websites you can go on to. I think findagrave.com is a good one. So if you're doing genealogical research or anything, it's a whole website where you can explore the cemeteries, and they have a database of the family relations and an actual picture of the tombstone. So if you're doing any kind of research, anybody's doing genealogical work or otherwise, that's a good resource. It's like taking a virtual walk through a cemetery. You may not get the same kind of feelings, but you can get a lot of good information.
How cool is that? That's really neat. It's kind of like a video game, huh?
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, I used to like the idea of old gravestones and just kind of, I like old cemeteries also, and I don't see very many around here. But yeah, have you ever exhumed a body or have done any kind of dig like that where it's been allowed?
No. I mean, I've come across some remains, but not an actual like exhuming a body for any purposes. But yeah, I've come across some definite remains, and you look, and a lot of them initially are the chicken bones or the beef bones or whatever, but occasionally you'll find maybe a femur or something.
Really?
So it depends on what you're looking for, where you are. If you're in a general privy in some kind of a small area of some of the places I've been, there's not a whole lot of human remains, but you do sometimes come across some different things. I've come across some unfortunately, more like infant remains, things like that. Or maybe somebody's had, miscarriages or whatnot. So it's really sad. But yeah, you come across that kind of stuff. But I've never actually exhumed a body for any kind of academic purposes.
I thought that might be interesting. I'm kind of weird like that too, I guess. But it sounds like it might be, fun to kind of look into those things. But in the old days, it seems like they didn't have all the embalming and all that stuff. So it's nice to just have a more natural burial. We were talking about that the other day when I was interviewing a woman, and about the green burials where, you just kind of, you don't have embalming and all this busyness. You just get planted in the earth.
Right. No, and that reminds me of that whole back to the ashes to ashes, back to the earth kind of. Yeah, the whole idea that I don't know if you're familiar with the Tibetan sky burials, but those are pretty grotesque.
Mm-hmm. Right,
I mean, in a way you could make the argument, of course, spiritually, that it's a really very, very good way to do it. You're giving things back to the earth, you're whatever. But to me, I don't know if I'd like to go that way. But the idea is that people would deflesh the body and cut it up and put it on the side of a mountain so that predators could come and eat it,
right.
Mostly like critters and different things. And there's a lot of cultures that have done that. So
it's kind of like pick your poison, isn't it?
Exactly.
The Viking funeral's not bad. That's just kind of like, put you out in the middle of the lake somewhere and light a torch.
Feeling anything, so it's all good, but
yeah, I won't be there, so but yeah, it's interesting, kind of morbid, isn't it? Anyways, everyone have a wonderful weekend. Looks like we're out of here. I thought I heard that music there. Thank you again, Heather, for being on tonight. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Bye.
Listening to Revolution Radio.